Welcome back to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach and an energy healer. I'm joined today with Amena Chaudhry. Amena Chaudhry is a DEI strategist, inclusion coach, and speaker with over 20 years of experience across corporate, nonprofit, government, and education sectors. She works with high-impact, high-integrity executives who understand the importance of systemizing belonging and inclusion, but don't know how to go about achieving it. Growing up as a second-generation Punjabi Muslim immigrant and a bicontinental citizen, Amena has navigated her share of spaces where she wasn't seen, heard, or valued. She's also seen too many well-intentioned leaders struggle to make lasting systemic changes needed to create equity, causing undue fear, stress, and burnout. Today, she helps leaders level up their practical, inclusive skills so they can create cultures where equity is pursued and where belonging is the norm, and to do this with confidence. Welcome, Amena.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate the invitation and excited to meet your audience.
Thanks. And we're glad to have you as well. So many things from your bio land with me because I've spent a lot of time talking with Elaine Lynn Herring, and her book just came out yesterday, Unlearning Silence.
Yes.
And so a lot of things that you say really in your bio remind me of what she will say, because well-intentioned, knowing that leaders, because I serve women primarily, women who get in those high-ranking leadership spots, they get there and then they're like, oh, wait, the system runs pretty deep. And if they make too much change or too loud too quickly, they could put a target on their back.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things really land with me as I read your bio, because I was that leader in that space and it became abusive. So I'm happy to have you here talking about this.
Oh, that's exciting. Thank you for saying that. You actually nailed the essence a little bit of what excites me of the work that I'm doing. So I work with leaders, executive leaders, primarily in organizations, either one-on-one coaching or in teams. And I see that again and again, right? I think leaders sometimes don't realize that they get to their leadership positions by demonstrating that they know how to perpetuate the status quo. You don't get to leadership skills. So another way of saying this actually is that you actually make it to senior leadership positions and to C-suite positions by practicing and norming exclusion and inequity. That's what you're good at. And what you need to do when you are in those positions, if you understand the importance of belonging, if that is something that you care deeply about, you actually have to put in the work to unlearn what got you to your leadership positions so that you can actually, from those leadership positions, make the changes and moves without getting a target on your back. I really appreciate you mentioning that, how there's an art in figuring out how to do that.
What's interesting is when you say practicing, the way you get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll my eyes so hard at this with light and love. But in my experience of almost 20 years in corporate America, you had to play the game. That's what I roll my eyes at so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the game, by the way, the game that was never designed with women and people of color in mind. It was for one type of person to excel in this world. And I almost wrote a book this year, about how I don't want there to be a game at all. What if we were able to lock arms and rise together? We're not there yet. And so that's what really resonates with me, is that people get promoted because they play the game well, they play politics, they're performing, all those things. And then they get there. And a lot of times, I'm not saying everyone, but in my experience, when you get there, it's very easy to just keep perpetuating the same broken systemic game.
Well, because that's what got you there. It's very deeply ingrained what will make you succeed and what will not. Changing the system is not going to lead to success. And so I think that's when I'm coaching my clients, a really light bulb moment for them to realize is your first step cannot be changing the system. It just can't be. That's setting yourself up for failure. It's setting up all the other people around you for failure, because there's some front-loading work that needs to happen first before you actually say, I've woken up and I've decided to change the system. And for the audiences listening, if it helps, if this is a challenging talk, another way to look at this, or a place in the real world that this is demonstrated, is we see what happens to firsts, right? This is the reason why firsts don't work out. We saw Professor Claudia Gay and the outcome there, right? They don't put people in leadership positions for whom the system was not designed to support, and then also give them decision-making power. The rest of the system around them is not going to support that. And so there's some other work that has to be done first. So yeah, great entry. I like this. Thank you.
I hope that we can say you're not going to be able to get in the role and do change right away yet. We're in this really interesting time where the pandemic, this is what I believe, the pandemic allowed a lot of people climbing the ladder. And I also want to get rid of the ladder. All these things, of course. It gave them a moment to pause to say, and I'm not suggesting everyone had this moment, but it was in some way a record scratch moment for everyone to say, do I want to keep doing this? And this could be related to career or not. Do I want to keep doing this the same way I've been doing it before? Pandemic allowed a pause or a break from autopilot for a second to say what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And now that we're post-pandemic for the most part, many people just wanted to go back to what was quote unquote safe pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. So they just kept on trucking in the same broken system and they wanted it back. Mm-hmm. And then many are actually on the other side of pandemic being like, no, I don't want to go back to the way it was. I'm out. We need both. We need all. And again, it's the well-intentioned. If somebody hears nothing else from this, for those well-intentioned peeps, when you get there, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget what you want to try to change, et cetera, all the things. So what moves are you excited to be making right now?
I think the move that I'm really excited to be making is, you know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So,
I do.
Yeah, a first-generation business owner.
I do.
This really scary journey, and it's hard. I've been at it for about 18 months properly, and I'm starting to understand and realize why a large percentage of BIPOC businesses fail in the first 3 years or don't make it past the first 3 years. And speaking of our socialization and what we learn, our school systems don't teach us to be business owners, even though that seems to be the American dream. It's not ever taught. And so oh my God, am I learning about business owning and all that goes into it? I'm a DEI strategist. Inclusion coaching is my thing. But I'm learning that stepping into entrepreneurship means that I had also implicitly agreed to sales and marketing. Apparently.
In operations and HR. But yeah, you're the whole show.
I know, you're the whole show. I was just like, oh God. So I'm really excited to be making some headway and ground into building a pipeline, building my clientele. I have some offerings out. I'm excited about getting those off the ground and running. And so we are in interesting times, especially for the DEI field, seriously interesting times. This is probably the oddest time to start this kind of a work solo, or even try to look at these positions, right? So I'm just, I'm excited to be building this enterprise where I'm going to be taking care of myself while doing a shit ton of good in the world. And also all this hard work and time investment is going to be in alignment with taking care of my health. Yeah, I'm coming out of recovery 3 years of some serious nonsense and plot twists. And I am really excited that for the first time I'm actually able to take care of myself while also figuring out how do I make money?
You know what's interesting is that's something that has been the most fascinating to me during my entrepreneurship, and I'm about a year and a little bit, just a year. Back in my corporate days, I had the big title, I was making the big money, and I was not okay. Mm-hmm. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I was not okay. But the money, what we're taught about wellness or responsibility, that supersedes all. So I was not okay, but I was making money. Now, it's this beautiful space where you can do both. I feel personally, it's a birthright to be able to do both. Mm-hmm. And the both, and it's not just two, it's all. Abundance comes in so many different forms. And the top for me now is my mental well-being, number one. Number two is my physical well-being. Number three, emotional. And then we get into some of the other. But I find that the most fascinating is that how much we We, meaning we as society, in the one right way and the one right way to do life, benefiting one type of person. It's amazing to me how much we have been and are willing to sacrifice of ourselves for that one right way.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not talking about self-care because that
Right.
industry has a lot of problems with it, but somehow like, taking care of the vehicle, your body, is
Yes.
not part of the right way equation. That to me is mind-blowing and has been a revelation. So I'm really excited to be like on this journey of I don't know where this is going to go. I'm hopeful that I'll succeed and also know that like, I'm taking care of my body. I'm taking care of my mental well-being. I'm taking care of my physical well-being. Yeah, and I'm doing work that I love. I love I love it when my clients go through transformation. I love it when they're like finally released from the cycle of building awareness, shame to status quo, building awareness, shame, status quo. Like most times they're stuck in that and like releasing them from that and making them more powerful leaders.
Here, something that I share with my clients that they both laugh at and do agree with, but they're always like, oh, you're going to tell me the thing, aren't you? The how, the when, and the what is none of our business. What is
Mm,
our business is the alignment of our mental, physical, emotional, if you're into it, spiritual well-being. All of that is the alignment to receive the messages and guidance from God, creator, universe, whomever you feel that there's like a higher self. That's our job, is to align and trust so that that beautiful unfolding can come. And I'll speak for myself, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I could have kept going in corporate. I could have kept
mm,
it going. I could have just kept. And I would have had a really short physical life. I was
God.
I was dying inside. I was just a shell of a person. And you know, what really started to hurt inside was the fact that I knew I was meant to be on the front lines, helping usher in the new paradigm and helping vibration of humanity to increase. And I wasn't doing that. So it
Mm,
all came to a beautiful head, you know?
mm. Yeah. Yeah, my story is that like I was continuing. I had no imagination to leave. And here's the thing that like sometimes upsets me and I need to figure out how to heal and get over. I had mentors, mostly white women who knew the work I was doing. I was working doing DEI related work in the workplace and had my Zafara Consulting as a gig on the side. I mean, I'm a full-time employee and you can imagine how much I was doing on the side, not a ton. But like I did that because I was able to do things with more integrity when I was an employee. So I had that awareness and never ever did someone tell me, why are you not charging money? Why are you doing it for free? One, build a business. This could be your like full-time job. You don't need to be an employee because God knows how I've had many of those conversations. And similar to what you were saying is I would have continued on. I actually didn't have a choice. I landed in the hospital and almost died. Like my work almost actually killed me. And so, like, you're right. Like, I was doing fantastic work under insanely adverse environment. I accomplished some amazing stuff. Like, I left behind some amazing legacies, but I almost died.
Right.
That to me, like, sometimes blows my mind. And like, for all the stuff that my employer said, they didn't want to extend my leave past the FMLA required leave. And so, like, I lost my job. And so, like, for me, it was more of a wake up call of, as I came out of recovery in 2021, late 2021, I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to put myself back in that. That doesn't make any sense. And then been on LinkedIn, meeting people like you, Nora, and
Yeah.
other women saying, this, this can be a business, Amena. You do not need to go back to work and getting that encouragement. I've got this.
We need you out here.
Thank you.
The willingness, because we are unique spirits. And here's what I'll go a little bit into. Again, my thought. You almost died.
Yeah.
I almost died. For me personally, I knew that it was again, whomever you feel is protecting and guiding you. For me, it's my spirit team. My
Mm-hmm.
spirit team was putting these experiences in front of me, not to test me, not to get me to die, not to hurt me. It was helping me. Well, first of all, I'm a tough one. I think you know that about me. So my team, can you imagine? Let's get her out of the corporate game. Let's get her to do something on her own. It would have had to be something really major, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, so that's what they did. And that was my wake up call too. It was my awakening into my unique brilliance, my soul essence, my magic.
Yeah, because I bet you we were kick-ass employees, both of us.
Oh,
Yeah.
Amina, you and I, ooh,
Where else would the signal come from that you need to do something else?
exactly, exactly. This is inspiring me. Like we should collab on something in our two
We
businesses.
should, yeah.
Powerhouse. Yeah, I won a Stock Excellence Award a month before I said today's my last day. So by all accounts, like the metrics and the
Mm.
work, yeah, you and I were excelling. And you brought up a really great point. You did such amazing things, and
Mhm.
they still weren't willing to have your back, right? Because of policies or that no longer work in today's culture, that no longer work for today's population, today's society, and the amazing spirits and souls like you and me that are doing the work. I want to ask you something I'm curious about with DEI specifically.
Mhm.
Of course, it's all the buzz,
Oh, yes.
DEI crumbling, et cetera, all this.
Oh, gosh.
Let me ask you, here's my observation. Tell me if I'm anywhere close. My observation is that like DEI, similar to any other work, like for me, I was the leader of our employee resource group in corporate.
Mhm.
All of and I'll use well-intentioned
Mhm.
ideas and programs and initiatives, and DEI was never supposed to be an initiative. It was supposed to be the way forward, the culture going forward. I see the challenge as when we've talked about so far, the one right way that the US and like the quote unquote American dream, which is dead, by the way, but I digress. The way that one right way was set up, those are the same systemic expectations that were creating DEI in corporate America. So my observation is like, there's no wonder why this is happening on the other end, because it was actually not created from the people and the really amazing spirits that were
Mhm.
driving this work forward.
Well, the origins of DEI in the US, at least, was in the context of racial sensitivity trainings that were rolled out by the military. In the military context, that's the origins. And then it was rolled into the corporate era world
I didn't
origin.
know that. So
Yeah.
the origin came from the military. Okay.
As racial sensitivity trainings. I mean, it's not a surprise. Racism is a really massive legacy of this country that it hasn't figured out how to unroot itself from, and a large source of non-belonging and inequity, and et cetera, and et cetera. And so, through a series of backlashes to racial sensitivity type trainings in the workplace, we have the weak, distilled, bizarre, I want to say, ineffective, waste of money. I don't know what other words to use.
I liked bizarre the best.
I almost feel like going to your analogy at the beginning, like it's like DI was a woman who made it to senior leadership, and they were like, yeah, you're not changing the system. I'm
Right?
not gonna let you do that with it. And so I think like DI was, instead of it expanding and growing and becoming stronger and more robust to be integrated into business goals and outcomes, it became this appendix, let's say, that now and then we realize we need to make use of. And I'll say, and I'll be the first one to admit, like, we've been doing DEI wrong. That's why it keeps failing. That's why it has a bad rep. It is not doing and performing the function that it should have. And one of the things that we do really, like, two things that we do wrong with DEI is, like, in businesses is randomly throw solutions at problems without actually taking a look at what the problem is. And we don't even know what the problem is. We're in the dark throwing arrows. And then we're complaining, well, it cost me a lot of money. Why didn't it work? That's one thing. And then the other thing I'll say is that the only place that trickle down theory works is culture change. We are wired for belonging. And my wiring is that I'm going to actually, my mirror neurons are going to help me mirror and align with the people who control my paycheck. It's that simple. And so 10 out of 10 times organizations where DEI work is not sustainable, not getting done, or where your marginalized employee engagement surveys tell you that they're not satisfied with the DEI work, it's because leadership is not on board and you're doing performative, surface level, bizarre solutions that are on the shoulders of your employees who are not getting paid for it. And so when I set out to build Zafara Consulting, I wanted to do DEI differently. I had experience doing DEI and DEI adjacent work. I'm sure I'm certified, so I have like this interesting intersection with HR, and how HR also is interestingly not in favor of proper DEI work. But like I found that traditional DEI practices or best practices, they weren't grounded in solving root cause issues of inequity and exclusion. And that organizations weren't leveraging data to identify root causes and then reverse engineering tactics to implement and strategies to implement that would solve for those root causes. And so when I'm working with organizations today, one, I make sure I'm working with organizations who already understand the importance of systemizing belonging, but this is not a one-off. So when I work with leaders today, I work with leaders who understand the importance of systemizing belonging, but just don't know how to do it. So I'm not for everyone. I will honestly just say that. Like, that's one of the things I learned. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not. I don't take personal offense for not being for everyone. I don't work with people who are at the stage where they need to understand the why. Because I am not here to teach the why. I'm actually an operational person. I'm going to teach you the how. Everybody has good intentions. We all possess a ton of courage. We often, because of our socialization, don't know how to access and activate our courage. We don't know how to put our good intentions to work. And so I actually help leaders figure out what's the smart way to spend your courage, one, and how do you build systems so that good intentions can translate into good impact? Because right now we have good intentions, random actions, bad impact. That's a pattern I think a lot of organizations are stuck in. And Zafara's approach is grounded in real-time data. I have ways to start work from a data point. And my goal is to build an organization's internal capacity to lead DEI with confidence, not just with confidence and with impact. I tell people I'm like my mothering style, because I am a no-nonsense person, but I'm very nurturing. But my style is I want to make leaning on an external consultant unnecessary. Lean on an external consultant, but not for everything. I want to make it unnecessary. I want to build your internal capacity to be able to do and sustain this work. And that starts with leadership. It always starts with leadership.
Yeah, I vibe the same way. My goal for my clients is to not need me. We build in you the trust and confidence in who you are and what you bring. That's why, and it made me kind of chuckle when you were like, that you're an ops person and you love the how. That's why earlier when I said the how is none of our business on a spiritual level, when you give full surrender and trust to the universe, that's when beautiful magic unfolds. But I hear you but I was that makes me laugh that you're focus on the how. So thanks for that. I agree with all of that. And it's just, it became an initiative like anything else. And I was in the presence of some leaders behind closed doors. They would be like, yeah, DEI. Let's just say we did it. There were literally those people.
Oh, yes. I've been in those spaces as an employee.
Right. And it was well, that feels crummy because I was the one like you wanting to really figure out how we do this, So speaking of which, I want to go to a post that you made about a week ago and I want to read it because it resonated with me again, because some of the people in charge around me that were saying those things, that DEI was fluff and not needed and with this and that, they were the ones then getting promoted. And I'm like, who is paying attention? Who is holding these people that are in charge accountable to what is actually good for the people? And it was actually never. So I want to go to this post. You write, how important is it for you to assess your inclusive leadership skills? I hear a lot of leaders say they believe in equity inclusion who say they're inclusive leaders. And rarely do we hear how they know that they are actually experienced as inclusive. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you are a C-suite, executive leader, or in your organization are in charge of facilitating change within organizations where you find yourself navigating relationships and systems around change making and transformation. A business, life, or career coach who believes in being sensitive to your clients' identities and lived experiences. And then you have a poll. And so for me, as a life coach, I'm going to respond real time to your poll. How important is it for you to have an objective measure of your inclusive leadership skills? For me, very important. Yes. So for me, it comes directly from my clients, and we have very, very transparent conversations. I help people self-select into my orbit. So here's what I'm always fascinated about. In the corporate world, in my experience, there were no objective measures as it relates to, is this a good leader? It's only about, is this leader making the numbers or not? Yes or no? And that was it. Tell me about this post. What is that objective measure?
Yeah.
And of course, everyone's going to respond. Of course, it's important. And I'm inclusive. I'm an amazing leader. Everyone's going to say that.
Yeah. So, like, I wasn't expecting anyone to say not important at all, and
Sure.
predictably, 0% of people responded with that. 93% said yes, and 7% said somewhat important. So, like, I'm kind of curious about that. This is one of the things that I learned. Like, my background is in learning and development, where my HR certification comes from, and then DEI work. And one of the things I noticed, my professional lived experience, but also you rattled out my identities. Like, I have multiple intersecting marginalized identities, and I experience systems very differently than the people who have the power to actually shift systems. And so I will tell you that 10 out of 10 times, I'm close to 50 years old, 10 out of 10 leaders that I have personally interacted with will profess that they are inclusive leaders. And this is going to be a hard one for the audience who's listening who know me personally. I'll also say 10 out of 10 leaders that I have actually met and interacted with do not have inclusive leadership skills. I'm going to be just honest. There is a handful of exceptions I can count on one hand, who went through coaching with me or with someone else and developed those after like tons of conversations. But like 100% of leaders who say, I am an inclusive leader, actually do not have inclusive leadership skills. And so my question is like, when you say I'm an inclusive leader, how do you know? And unfortunately, when I actually have in-person conversations, leaders will say they know this because they wouldn't have made it to leadership roles unless without that. And that is absolutely, I feel like that's where the biggest misunderstanding comes. Mm-hmm. Not realizing that one of the qualifications to make it to senior leadership position in any place in the US and Canada, because of the systems we live in, is mastering inequitable, exclusionary practices and skill sets. And so when I work with clients, my favorite tool that I just got certified in last year is the IDI. It stands for Intercultural Development Inventory. Unlike a leadership personality assessment like Myers-Briggs or Leadership Circle or other assessments that tell you really basically who you are, deepen your understanding of like your preferences of how to be, how to interact and engage with people who have different preferences, etc. This is a developmental inventory. It literally measures how much complexity you bring to differences and commonalities, like with how much complexity do you engage with difference. And so basically it's measuring intercultural competence, like your relationship to difference, whether in yourself or in others. So it measures that in two ways. It measures your self-perception, how you perceive yourself. So leaders who say, I'm an inclusive leader. And it also measures how others experience you. So it measures where you actually land on their developmental continuum. And it gives you that gap and a development plan for you to work on so you can bridge the gap between who you want to be versus where you are. And so that's my favorite tool that I utilize when I'm coaching clients, when I'm working with teams. It's beautiful because in teams, everybody can keep their score confidential and a group profile can show a team like where they average out. The importance of this is anyone who's been out on a hike knows that when you get to the welcome center, they give you this map and they highlight it and whatnot. But like 30 minutes into your hike, the highlighted map is very useless unless you know where you are on the map. And so it becomes really important for you to be able to come to a junction where there's a map that's like baked into the ground. And not just that, it needs to have the "You are here" button or pin. Without the "You are here," that map is useless. And so DEI work has been failing, yes, because people are just taking a map and then randomly following a strategy and without first figuring out as an organization, where are you?
So is DEI something to be fixed? Is it something to just scrap and start over? Is it something that's going to pivot? What are those conversations look like for the future, Amena?
So I don't think it's not that DEI needs to be fixed. It's how we interact and do DEI that needs to be tweaked. I tell people, like when you're working with me, we have to be on the same page. DEI is about change work. If you are not looking to change things at the organization, if you're looking for a coat of paint, if you're looking for a new sofa set, new siding, that's not me. I think our orientation to DEI work needs to shift. We need to understand that a lot of organizations are like, we want to start DEI work, and they're very excited and they think they're starting at ground zero. And I tell them, no, you already have systems in place, but you need to understand already there are systems in place that are producing inequity, exclusion, non-belonging by design. step one is figure out where are you where are you on that map of where you have systems doing the opposite of what you want to do. And then you need to reverse engineer tactics, right? And so I think like our orientation towards DEI work needs to change. And how we do it needs to change, I would say. Especially in today's political climate, especially with post-COVID and the massive generation gap that is building up in organizations need to understand for businesses to thrive and succeed and adapt and be agile and be relevant even going forward. We need to understand how you are currently part of status quo and how you need to shift.
I completely agree with you. This is something I think that's happening, to your point, in the big four, I would say, in the workplace right now, which is the, Z, millennial, boomer, and X. Just like you said, no organizations are actually starting from scratch or from the ground floor. It's going back and assessing what's already in place, understanding the origin of why that was put in place, and then understanding how it needs to evolve for 2024. And I say that so broadly on purpose because I feel that's true across government, healthcare, retirement. Everything was put in place 100 years ago. It's not aged well.
It's not aged well, and we're behind on top of that. The business world is behind in terms of like how to create workforce environments. For example, like one of the things that I think businesses are very resistant to is like even thinking about retention differently. You have a whole generation of people who don't look at career development the same way like you and I did, right? They're not going to stay with you for 20 years. Your benefits that kept Amy and Amena in place are not going to keep them in place because there isn't the external stability in the world for them to like trust being in the one spot for long, right? And so we're behind. And so I would even say like employers need to figure out, leaders, people who have leadership positions need to figure out how to set up their businesses and the workplace ready for 2035. Like you need to look way ahead in advance because you're way behind actually.
You're right. If we started at 2024, we'd be behind.
Yeah. And so this sometimes is hard because I think I was reading Boston Global Company or Consulting. They had an article that stated that like most C-suite, a really high percentage of C-suite leadership is cishet white male. And it's the people who don't have the lived experience of not belonging, who are in charge of how money gets spent and are in charge of what DI stuff is going to get rolled out, who are in charge of like, no, system is changing or yes, we need to adapt. I think like what leaders and executives need to understand is like you need to invest in your inclusive leadership skills right now. Otherwise, your legacy is going to be that you didn't set up your organization to survive beyond your leadership.
And spoiler alert.
Yeah.
There's not just cishet white men in the workplace.
Yeah.
I feel like that needs to be said out loud because there's a lot of cishet white men that think that there's only them that exist.
Yeah. And when it comes to nonprofits, I'll just say cishet white women, right?
Yeah.
I think we spend too much of our life being very dutiful descendants of whatever systems we inherited. And if you're an executive leader, when you get to leadership positions, it's time to step out of being a descendant and into like thinking about like your legacy and what kind of an ancestor you want to be.
Right. Because I'm the cycle breaker in my family. And many of my family members, older family members, look at me like I have 5 heads and I'm crazy and like, where on earth did I learn all this? I'm like, well, who are you staying in place for?
Yeah.
Your parents are gone. Because we obey, by and large, our families when we're kids. But like when these people are fully grown, who are you trying to obey at this point?
It's a fundamental humaning error, I think, in the global north countries that it's like I was socialized into this idea, like I fulfilled that role well into my late 30s of like your parents need to be proud of you. But like we don't raise children with the idea of like, actually, no, the children need to be proud of parents. This actually should be the other way around. And people are tempted to say both. I'm like, well, you can only do one. Like you can't be both a descendant and an ancestor at the same time. Those are different duties. One looks back and tries to replicate and duplicate and perpetuate whatever they inherited. And the other one looks forward and leans on emergence, is flexible, is nimble. And so we need a very different leadership. And that different leadership right now, I will just say, there are no amount of books you can read to gain those skills. There are no amount of PD trainings you can go to and all of a sudden magically become that. I have found, I tell people consulting is transformative, but very slow scale. Coaching is transformative. Like when change I see, like clients have gone through like a 10-month coaching program with me and how they're able to show up in a very different way. And then that ripples down into the systems, right? That impacts, because I can't stress this enough, like positional power means something.
Mm-hmm.
Social and positional power means something. And so that's why I asked that post. So it's funny to me that you saw that post, because I was going to actually take a screenshot of the results and actually post today, because I'm going to tell people to do
Oh,
something.
fun. Well, that'll be a good tie-in. One last thing on this is that I'm never going to berate someone for what what they learned.
Mm-hmm.
What I will encourage, though, if you're not willing to consider a different viewpoint from what you have learned, we also may not vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Because then there's that fixed mindset on what you said about perpetuating the only thing you've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't fit today.
Yeah. Yes. And I like, for the audience, if it's helpful, like you don't actually have to change people's hearts and minds or your own beliefs right away. It's changing and tweaking behavior that will reverse engineer a new set of beliefs for you.
Too much change too quickly is scary for anyone. So that's where, to your point about this is what I love about long-term coaching, is we start to explore in a safe container. And the requirement is not that you have to change everything physically right away or like everything changes.
Precisely.
You feel into it. What are you feeling? Where can we trace that from? And we start to expand the consciousness. That's what we do over time.
And hey, I'll say this about senior leaders and executives and C-suite folks. What their expertise is, they know how to run operations. They actually know how to manage systems. But what they don't know is that they have blind spots in terms of like how the system is currently, how they're actually perpetuating harmful aspects of the system. And those blind spots are by design. And that is what they need to get help to remove, because after that, they're experts. They're going to know once that awareness is there, once they have like micro skills built, you're not going to need a personal trainer for the rest of your life. You just need to know how to do the moves so that you don't hurt yourself, start building the muscle, and then you can actually go do workouts on your own.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, oh, this went fast.
I know. I can't believe it's already like almost an hour.
Amena, where can we find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Fastest way to get a hold of me is sending me a DM. Follow me. I also have a newsletter. So I have been heavily present on LinkedIn, but with the way things are going and unpredictability of what LinkedIn does with people who have dissenting views, I have moved a lot of my thought leadership to a newsletter. And so sign up for my newsletter. That's how you know what I'm up to, what's percolating. I have a Linktree link that I try to keep up to date. And so I'll share that with you as well. That's the other way.
Closing remarks as we wrap up.
This is what I'll say. I think Nelson Mandela said this. This is his quote. It seems impossible until it's done. And so I just want people to know, a lot of times the common perception is that this is hard. DEI is really hard. It's not doable. It's mysterious. And I'll tell you, it's not actually. It's not actually hard. I have coached clients within 5 months, have made massive change and difference, and are very operational. This is just about like right now, the dominant systems out there, trainings, professional development stuff, consulting, I don't know what else to list. They are not actually helping you build the right muscle. Like, I feel like they're all getting you to do squats and hoping that you'll be able to do a pull-up. Well, you want to do a pull-up, you got to work on your back muscles. And so it's about strategy, and this is doable. It's actually easy, but you need to take the steps and you need to find someone to work with. Taking an assessment is a great first step because it helps you figure out where you are, and then it's a massive opening of the curtain.
Thank you, Amena.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me.